Two. I want it all.
Hey, what's up? Randy here, Mediocre at Best Podcast. Thanks for watching and or listening. Got a lot to talk about today. Minnesota Vikings, the lack of free agency moves that they've been making has just been ticking me off to no avail. And next segment, we're going to talk about Dirk Nowitzki. He surpassed 30,000 points all time. Only one of 6 NBA players to do that in NBA history. And I got to sound off on Colin Cowherd going off on Dirk Nowitzki saying, oh, well, he's one of the best European players of all time. But yeah, he's one of the 50 or 60 best NBA players of all time. I'm going to sound off on him. But first, this has been no secret. If you've been following this podcast, I've expressed my disdain for this offensive line for the last couple of years. This is one of the more important off seasons for Rick Spielman, and maybe in his entire career, and here's why. The Minnesota Vikings have a Super Bowl caliber defense through and through. There's really no weakness on the defensive side of the football. Now, we lost Captain Munnerlyn in free agency. We lost quite a few players in free agency so far. We lost Captain Munnerlyn, our slot corner. That's going to be a hard position to fill. Hopefully, I believe his name is Mackenzie Alexander. Hopefully, he can step up and fill that role. But we have a Super Bowl caliber defense. On offense, it's not sexy at all. That's an understatement, really. But receivers, we got receivers. We've got running backs. We got Jerick McKinnon. Matt Asiata's gone. Adrian Peterson's gone. It looks like we might get Eddie Lacy. We'll at least draft someone draft a running back in the draft. Either way, we'll have that set. Kyle Rudolph, he isn't the greatest tight end, even though a lot of people hype him up. He's really underachieved in his career up to this point, but that's okay. And we got Sam Bradford as a quarterback, and I know a lot of people like to get on him. Look, you need a competent quarterback. You don't necessarily need this high, flashy style quarterback. We saw that with Russell Wilson, how he won the Super Bowl the first time, led by that defense for the Seattle Seahawks, the Legion of Boom. And then we saw Peyton Manning with the great defense that he had a couple of years ago before he retired, win the Super Bowl against the Carolina Panthers. So we got everything in place. The difference between the Minnesota Vikings contending for a Super Bowl or possibly going 8-8 or 7-9 is the offensive line. The worst position group in football was the Minnesota Vikings offensive line last year. Obviously the worst offensive line in football. They may have been the worst position group in the NFL last year. This is one of the more important off seasons for Rick Spielman. You've got US Bank Stadium, the second year that it's going to be open. The Super Bowl is going to be at US Bank Stadium this year. We had high expectations coming into last year, saying, oh, this could be a Super Bowl contender, and it looked like that we would be. You start off 5-0, and we knew the offensive line wasn't going to be great, but it's like, oh, just hold it together. And that's the thing. I've always been very clear on this. I'm not naive to the fact that we can't get high caliber offensive linemen in free agency. My whole thing was, can we at least not be the worst offensive line in football? Can we at least have an average offensive line? Let's just be average. That's all we're asking for. Just enough to where we could get a push at the 1 yard line to get into the end zone. Or if it's third and short, 3rd and 1, 3rd and a half inch, we can get the first down. Or we can give Sam Bradford more time to throw instead of 5 yard out routes all the time. Can we at least do something to where it's like, okay, don't be god awful, just be okay, right? And then we get into this offseason, right? So far, the Minnesota Vikings, and I'm looking at this from the Star Tribune, we've lost 6 players so far. Aldi Cole, linebacker, Rhett Ellison, tight end, Charles Johnson, wide receiver, Matt Khalil, that's whatever. I wasn't worried about whether we kept Matt Khalil or not at left tackle. We were still going to have left tackle issues. Jeff Locke, punter, and as I mentioned, Captain Munnerlyn, he's actually gone as well. Hopefully Mackenzie Alexander can fill up that spot. The additions that we had in free agency, knowing that offensive line was the most important thing that we needed to address, everything else. Riley Reiff, offensive tackle from Detroit. I'm actually not going to get down on that one. I think he's okay. I think he can be an average line because after all, I've been saying let's just at least be average, a competent group of offensive linemen. I'm okay with Riley Reiff. And then we signed Mike Remmers from the Carolina Panthers. I've been paying attention to fan reactions from the Carolina Panthers. For the most part, from what I've seen, they couldn't be more thrilled that he's gone. They essentially feel the same way about him that I felt about Matt Khalil. And look, we swap players essentially. This comes from Matt Clausen, senior analyst for Pro Football Focus, talking about Mike Remmers. comparing them to TJ Clemens. So, in the last 1,089 pass protection snaps, TJ Clemens, 112 total pressures, including 17 sacks. Mike Remmers, 105 pressures, including 18 sacks on 1,269 snaps. So he's slightly better than TJ Clemens, but is that necessarily average? I'm a little concerned about that. He could be Matt Khalil just at the right tackle spot. So I'm very concerned about that. And then after that, the Minnesota Vikings haven't done anything. They haven't done a damn thing. We've lost all these players left and right. We did re-sign Jeremiah Searles, who played pretty good at the beginning of the year last year. But you released Brandon Fusco, Mike Harris. I'm actually not mad at that at all. But we haven't done anything else. Russell Okung signed with the Los Angeles Chargers. Andrew Whitworth signed with the Los Angeles Rams. All these players that at least the average offensive lineman, there were only a few of them out there in free agency, and they're all gone. I don't understand why the left tackle spot, I'm assuming Riley Reif is going to control that. But we're looking at a situation where right tackle, we're talking about a competition between Mike Remmers and TJ Clemens, because based on those stats that I just read, Mike Remmers isn't a lot to be our right tackle. And then the right guard situation is still up for grabs. I mean, assuming that Joe Berger, unless you move him from center to right guard, something. But our right side is still a question mark. So we're basically coming up in another offseason in which we've been doing the same thing for the last 3 or 4 years. We bring in scrap heap linemen to just compete and hopefully battle it out, and maybe we can find a diamond in the rough somewhere. This is absolutely ridiculous. I don't understand how you can sit here and have this group, this is the one thing holding the Minnesota Vikings back from contending for a Super Bowl, and you're going to go out here and sign a dude that's slightly better than TJ Clemens? The Carolina Panthers, the fans, they're happy as hell that he's gone. I don't understand that, and that's all the signings that we've done as far as bringing in unrestricted free agent. That's all that's happened. Riley Reif, who's a significant upgrade from Matt Khalil, I'll take that at the left tackle spot. And Mike Remmers are dudes that's slightly better than TJ Clemens. So Matt Khalil at the right tackle spot, basically. Not to mention that we still have right guard issues, assuming that you keep Joe Berger at the center spot. I don't get what Rick Spielman is waiting for. We know that throughout the draft, I'm going to wait. I'm going to ultimately wait to see what he does at draft time. Maybe he trades up. Maybe he uses his whatever picks he has to trade up to get back into the first round to get another offensive lineman. I'm okay with that. I'm going to wait and reserve judgment before calling for Rick Spielman's job until draft night to see what he does. We do call him Slick Rick for a reason, that he's able to use his draft picks and get back into the first round, trade down, get value. We get that. But it is time, Rick Spielman. It's time to stop, as my aunt would say, farting around and just sitting there hanging out, thinking that this is going to be just magically better out of nowhere, signing scrap heap linemen for another Band-Aid project of an offensive line group. I don't understand. And then not only that, you're going after dudes like Alshon Jeffrey. It was reported by Ian Rappaport that the Vikings have emerged as possible suitors for Alshon Jeffrey, got into the mix, negotiated with him. And what, Alshon Jeffrey turned down more security from the Vikings to go to Philadelphia Eagles for a 1 year, basically prove it to himself or bet on himself contract. So you were going after a pricey wide receiver. We had about $37 million in cap space. Already signed Riley Reif, and you're going to talk about going after a high-profile, an expensive wide receiver, one that we don't need, assuming we keep Adam Thielen, who's been tendered for a second-round pick, and we got Stephon Diggs, Jarius Wright, and by the way, we have Laquan Treadwell, who you drafted in the first round last year that we didn't need over offensive linemen, and he caught. Let me look this up real quick. You drafted Laquan Treadwell last year over an offensive lineman, in which we already knew that we needed an offensive line, but you said, no, we're going to go after a wide receiver, and we're going to keep this patchwork offensive line group going. You go after Alshon Jeffries, a wideout that we don't need, an expensive one that we don't need, mind you, after drafting Laquan Treadwell in the first round last year, which we didn't need anyway. He could be a good receiver, no disrespect to him, but we've needed offensive linemen forever. You need to draft an offensive lineman in the first round. You haven't drafted an offensive lineman in the first round since Matt Khalil, and we see what happened with that. Laquan Treadwell, right? You took him over an offensive lineman. Caught one pass of 3 out of 3 targets for 15 yards. Well, isn't that just fantastic? That is ridiculous. And you're going after Alshon Jeffrey too? What the hell? It doesn't matter if we have Alshon Jeffrey, Eddie Lacy, Stephon Diggs. It doesn't matter who we have if Sam Bradford does not have time to throw. And if he doesn't have time to throw, then we are screwed. We're looking at another situation where we go 8-8. The left tackle spot I'm okay with Riley Reeve. But this Mike Remmers dude, it looks like he's going to compete for a starting right tackle spot at TJ Clemens, and we're still screwed on right guard. Congratulations, Rick Spielman. If this falls away, now granted, we're going to wait till draft night. I'm going to wait till draft night before I make my final decision. Well, obviously, my opinion doesn't matter. The Vikings are going to do what they want. But as far as how I feel, I'm going to see what Rick Spielman does on draft night before I make an ultimate call as far as how I ultimately feel. Right now, he's doing a piss-poor job. Right now, he's doing a terrible job. He's being nonchalant, going after expensive wide receivers that we don't need over offensive linemen that are going at the average offensive linemen that were there, which is what we needed. We've had piss poor offensive line for the last 3 years. All we need is average, and you let the average offensive lineman in free agency go for absolutely nothing while we're going after Alshon Jeffrey, a wide receiver who you're trusting over Laquan Treadwell, who you took over an offensive lineman in the first round last year. Congratulations. I think it beholds Rick Spielman. I said this on 1500 ESPN not too long ago in Vikings Vent Line during the season. I think it beholdens Rick Spielman to send scouts out to every fitness facility that you can find within a 100-mile radius of US Bank Stadium. Anybody that you see doing bench presses, bring them in for a tryout so they can be an offensive lineman. Have them compete for the right tackle and right guard spot if they're benching 225 pounds. I don't care if it's even 5 times. 5 reps, come on in. Let's see what you got. So anyway, up next, going to talk Dirk Nowitzki, all the haters coming out, talking about, oh, it's 30,000 points all time, not a big deal. Oh, he's one of the best European players of all time. Top 50 or 60, Colin Cowherd, I'm talking to you specifically. Mediocre at best, realistic Randy.